So today I'm going to talk about something with regarding PHP. In particular, we're going to talk about the steps that you need to do to set up PHPStorm. So you'll notice here in this module on our outline for our website, it says set up PHP and PHPStorm on your computer. So the first thing you need to do is you need to install PHP. Because we're doing more than just console applications and actually want to do web applications, we want to actually install a web server. Apache with PHP support is what we want to do. So what I'd like you to do is to install AMP, which is AMPP. It has support for Apache and PHP. It also, you can install it with Python, Perl, and both MongoDB and MySQL as options. There are certainly a lot of other LAMP, WAMP, and MAMP, that's depending on the operating system, stacks out there, but this supports all three. Windows, Mac, and Linux machines. The download page is there, is here. If for some reason that link doesn't work, again, you can search on AMP. Once you install it, it will create an icon on your desktop that looks like this. And if you click on it, it'll actually launch. Here you can see on the right-hand side. And currently I installed it with Apache, PHP, and MySQL. And you can turn things on and off with these buttons here. You can start and stop, for example, MySQL, same thing with Apache and PHP. So this will install support for PHP and the web server we need if we're going to want to run and debug locally PHP programs that are web programs. So the next thing you need is our IDE, and we're going to be using PHPStorm from JetBrains, and you can just go ahead and search on that, PHPStorm, and you want to just get the educational license, and what you'll notice when you click on it, it'll go through and you'll have to register with your email from campus, or otherwise it won't work. That's how they do the confirmations. So you get a year free, which is really nice. JetBrains makes really great IDEs for many different languages. We're going to be using two in this class, one for PHP, and we'll be using a different one actually for Node.js later in the quarter. But they're very popular in industry, so it's great to be able to utilize it for free. Okay, so now after you've installed that, you should put a desktop icon here. This is for the PHPStorm, and I already actually have it launched. And this is what it looks like, just a typical IDE. I already have an existing project that I've created that we're going to play with, a Hello World type project in PHP. Okay, so returning on, one of the things that you need to do is you need to point the PHPStorm to local interpreter, which is done under Settings, Language and Frameworks, and PHP. Now I here have Settings, Languages, and Frameworks. I go to PHP, and mine's already configured, but yours will be blank, so you want to click on it. And here I'm choosing a particular location. Here's AMPS, for example, and PHP 5.6, for example, and then you have to find the PHP executable, so I'll go ahead and change it. There it is the new, a newer version, whatever version it is that you want to install. And you'll notice that you'll have to know where it installed the AMPPS. Here's the AMPPS directory. I have a Windows machine. The default, I believe, that for Windows is in the program files, but when you do the installation, take note of where it is. And this is, here's the executable program that they made a desktop shortcut to. But here's two PHPs, oops, shoot. There we go, that were installed 5.6 and 7.1, and for this particular version the default was 5.6, and I just chose that. So, but again, whatever version you want. So that's the settings here under language and frameworks. So that's this step here that you need to set up. The next thing I want you to do is set up a local server. You're going to later, we'll talk about how to actually deploy to your server account that you're given, that you're going to get for PHP development, so it can actually be deployed to the internet. But you want to do development and testing on your local machine. So this kind of shows you the screenshots. You're basically going to go in again to settings, and in this case you're going to go to build, execute, deploy. We're going to choose deployment, and we're going to add a server. Okay, once we make that, you're going to click on the plus to add a server, and then you're going to specify a name, and it's going to be a local mounted folder, and basically it's going to ask you for the location. The default location of where you're going to put everything for your local website for AMPS is amps/www, so wherever you happen to install that. So if I go back and look at mine, so again, I'm under settings, I already have that up, and I look under build, so let's look under build, execution, and deployment, and I go to deployment. I've already set up two servers. Oops. So this one here, the AMPSS local, it's in my program files, AMPSS, and then /www. It maps to http://localhost, and this is local. Okay. Under mappings, later on, you can set up mappings for various projects. Like, for example, this is one of my projects, and it maps to the /hello world. So the URL looks like this, localhost /hello world. And you can add as many mappings as you want. While I'm here, I might as well show you a remote server that I created. This here, the connection is SFTP for secure file transfer. And this is my account, so your account information may be different, but my host is csweb01 at csueastbay.edu. This is the root path, which will be something that I will give you, and will be in your account information that's sent to you. And finally, your username and your password, which typically recently has been your NetID and your NetID password, but again, that information will be sent to you. And then the URL for you will be whatever host /tilde. In my case, my login, yours is going to be your NetID. Okay, so that is the next step. Another thing that I added here, I'm just kind of getting set up, is browser support for debugging. We'll talk about this more when we get to debugging in a moment, a little later, but for Chrome, I'm suggesting you use the Chrome browser. There is a JetBrains IDE support that you need to install. Okay, that's in addition to another plugin extension that you need to install, and basically just search for this Chrome JetBrains IDE and do an installation. So I'm on my browser right now. If I come up here to my settings, I go to more tools and I look at extensions. These are called extensions or plugins. I actually don't have a ton, but this is a new machine, so you can see here's the JetBrains IDE support that I was just talking about. And later on we're going to talk about Xdebug that we need further for debugging. Okay, so this is the first step, and we're done. The next step is how to create a project and how to set it up for deployment either to your local web server, the AMP server, or to your CS Web 01 or whatever the campus server or the server account you've been given access to. Or it might be some third-party service that you're paying for. But we'll talk about how to do that, how to deploy, how to run, and in the case of the local server, how to do debugging. So all of that is kind of linked off of this page here. And again, I give you a lot of screenshots to help you go through. So the first thing is, let's just talk about how to create a project and the steps of running it and what are the options. So to create a project is really easy. It's just file, new project. You're going to fill out some stuff like the name of the project. The default location will be there if you need to change it. I'm choosing right now an empty project, but this is what an empty project looks like. This is what an HTML template project looks like. And then I'm adding PHP inside here. So if I want a mixture of PHP and HTML. So depending on what kind of project type you want, you can choose that. Moving on, I'm just going to go ahead and use that HTML one, and I'm going to add a new PHP file by simply right-clicking, in this case on the source directory, and saying new PHP file. But you can do this from an empty project and only have PHP files in there. That's entirely up to you. So to run it, we have a couple different options, okay? And so I'm going to go through each one, and some of them are going to require some setup in order to work. So the first thing is, if you had a PHP program that was not a web application, that was just a regular kind of console application, option one is what you can do. I'm going to talk about it really briefly, but the first thing you need to do is you need to create a run configuration. You do this only once. And so what you're going to do is you're going to come in here and you're going to create a new, and I'll show you, I'll kind of demonstrate here. You're going to go to run and then edit configurations, and this is where you can add some. So for this project, for example, I have a bunch of PHP scripts, which are, these are the kind of command line programs, but you right click and then you choose one of these various options that you want to do, and we'll be going over those. Again, I have screenshots. So you're going to choose PHP script, and then basically you're going to enter in the name of the program that you want to run in the file. That's minimally what you need, and then at that point you can run it. So for example, this is the code, which is actually printing out, you can see some messages, but also some HTML. So this is actually probably more like a web application, not a console application, but I'll go ahead and I'll show you first the run configuration that's going to run it as a script. We'll go ahead and add one. And here we go. We'll grab the file, and you of course have to go to the right location. Oops, let's try this again. So this is, mine is located, my project in C, users, Lin. This is the standard location for PHP programs on Windows machines. And here we are, PHPStorm projects. And then this is the Hello World project. And inside there I have a source file. And in the source file I have the Hello World I want to run. Okay? So this is just going to be Hello World run in console. Okay? And so I'm going to hit apply and hit OK. when I'm ready to run it, I can say run. Now I have a bunch of configurations for this project, but the one I'm looking for is the Hello World run in console. And what you'll notice is down here is the console window. And you can see what it's done is it's printed out hi. Here's hi with a new line. That's why you see the new line there. That's \n. Then BR, these are just tags, hi2, hi3, and so on. Okay, and then I'm assigning a variable and printing out the value 3. Okay, that's the idea of running in a console. And you can see the example here with the simple hi. So we're going to move on, and you can set debugging points and run through the debugger. We're not going to, for the most part, have console applications because there might be some that you can run that way, but a lot of times we're going to be getting using session data, actually running through a web server. So what you typically want to do as a developer is option 2. You want to have a local development machine. So we've already installed our AMP, which is great. That's what we want. So the first thing you need to know is that we're going to assume that you've already installed PHP and installed our Apache server. So it consists of 2 steps. One is deploying the software, which is actually moving it. It kind of feels weird, but anyways, from your project over to, in this case, a local web server, which is literally on the same machine. So it's just moving the files in this case. But what it means basically is that we are actually moving it to a web server, albeit a local one. So what we're going to need to do is, first of all, we're going to need to upload it to the server that we already defined when we set up our PHPStorm before. And so just to give you an example of that, if, let's say, I go ahead and I want to add hi4 in there, okay, and I want to go ahead and I want to deploy this, I go to Tools, Deploy, and I'm going to just say Upload. I'm going to upload it, and now these are those 2 servers that I had to choose from. So I'm going to upload it to my local server. And it says, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and override this. Now, over on the right is where you can see our various hosts that we've defined. So I'm going to look at the local server, and you can actually take a look at the files that are there. So here's the source, here's the hello world, and if I click on it, this is saying, here it is, this is the hi4, and if you look at the path, it's there. Okay, so typically you want to edit it locally, move it over, and that's what we call deployment. So at this point, we're ready to run it, and there's actually 3 options for the step 2 of running, which seems, I know, kind of crazy, but the first one is to give the path to it and just type it in. I'm going to bring up another browser just so we can show you. http://localhost. Now this is where you need to know the name of where you've deployed it to. And if you remember, it was hello world. PHP was the URL for our local host for this project, and then source is the subdirectory, and then hello world.php. So I'm going to run it, and there it is. And here we can see, I'm going to zoom in, here's our hi4 that we just added. This is running it. So this is great. You can do this. Another option is instead to use a run configuration and actually use the actual run command or the run button instead. Okay, so launching it in essence from the actual tool. So the first thing we have to do is create a run configuration for it. So you go to Run, Edit Configurations, and you add a new one, and just like we did with the script, but now it's called a PHP web application. You're going to enter in, again, the path, okay, which will show you what the URL path is going to look like. You can choose browser. My default browser is Chrome, but if you wanted to change that, and of course you choose the server this is going to, which is our local server. We're just talking about local right now. So when you're ready to run, you just say run, run, and you select this configuration that I created, and it will run that one. And this is me showing with the previous mode. So let's take a look at, in fact, let's go ahead and get rid of that. Let's take a look at our configurations here. So run, again, edit configurations. And this was, I've already created one, a PHP application for my local amps. And this is what it looks like, again, just to revisit it. But if you wanted to create a new one, you just go plus web application, and it'll ask you which server do you want it to be on, what is the URL, what is the default, give it a nice name. I'm not going to add another one. So let's go back, look one more time at that. And here it is. Okay, so if you want to pause and set this up at any time in the video, please do so. So to run that again, we'll say run now, and we choose which one we want to run. So this isn't the script, but it's the running as a web application locally right here, and now it's launching it. And here you can see it launched it into Chrome, and as you can see, here's the -4 that we added a moment ago. So that's great. Okay, let's move on, and let's look at our last option. Okay, our last option is, hey, I want to debug it, right? I don't want to just run it. I want to debug it. And so this is assuming that you're using the Xdebug tool that comes downloaded as part of AMPS. If you don't want to use it, or if you're using a different Apache platform, you'll have to look online at PHPStorm's documentation on JetBrains' website to figure out how to set it up. But I'm assuming this is what we're doing here. So the first thing you have to do, this is kind of a one-time setup. So we're debugging, and we're going to debug between the browser and between the actual PHPStorm program. So we need a tool to communicate between those, right? And what we use is the plugin I mentioned before, which is the Xdebug helper. So you're going to install this. Again, I'm suggesting you use Chrome. If you're going to use a different browser, you're going to have to look for the Xdebug plugin or extension for that browser. There's a link here, really easy to install. One thing I want you to do is I want you to go to the settings for that extension, and this tells you how you do it, how you bring it up, but I'll demo it in a moment. You go to Chrome, Settings, More Tools, Extensions. However it is you get to your extensions, you choose it, and you choose Details, and it gives you the Xbug helper, and you want to make sure this IDE for the PHPStorm is set to all capital PHPStorm. And the reason why, what's going to happen is it's going to use this IDE key to communicate between the browser, which is this plugin, and the PHPStorm itself, and they use a key to exchange this kind of authentication to each other. Okay, so this is complicated, which is why I spent all this time putting this together for you. I unfortunately don't think that the documentation is it's okay, but it's not great on the PHPStorm website. Okay, the next thing you have to do in order for it to kind of match and communicate is you have to find your configuration file for PHP, which has been installed in the AMP server. And in my case, I'm using the PHP 5.6. So if I go, for example, here, and I'm going to navigate to my install directory, which is, hang on, there we go, program files, and here's amps, okay, and if I take a look at this inside my configuration directory, and if you see, this is what it's talking about being in your configuration directory. There's the file 5.5- PHP-5.6, and it's .ini. It's a configuration file. So this is the file what you want to edit. And basically, you want to add this. So do a search for the xdebug message inside that file and replace it with that. So if I search, I already actually have done that, but and I'm going to tell you something. I actually had a lot of problems with the configuration for PHP, and it took me literally a number of hours to figure out the right combination, which was really unfortunate. And there's a lot of people who are having the same problem. So do pay attention to this, and this is what you want to have this section here in the file look like that. You want to save it. When you change that file, one of the things you need to do is, if you have your server up, you need to kill it, okay? And you need to restart it. So again, you should have a little icon for you in order to launch it. And I just relaunched it, okay? All right, so again, this is a one-time thing you have to do, so it takes some time to get debugging to work, but there we go. The next thing you have to do is, so that was for the server, right? This was for the browser, right? The xdebug helper. Now we have one more thing, which is some additional settings inside PHPStorm. So if you go to Tools, Settings, Language Frameworks, PHP, and Debug, this is what you want to make sure happens, that it can accept external connections and it's port 9000. These two here, the force, the break, they're optional. If you check them, it will always stop at the first line of code, even if there's not a breakpoint. The second setting is the DBG proxy setting, and it needs to look like this. And this is where you see the PHPStorm key that will match the one on the browser. Okay. All right. So great. That's all the one-time settings you have to do. And now we can use that previous web application run configuration we did in option 2, but now we're not going to run it. We're going to run it in debug mode. So you can do that by clicking on the little debug button, which is, oops, let me get to the right, which is here, and you can run it. Or you can go to Run, and you can go to Debug, and then again choose this one. Either will do the same thing. I'm going to show you with the button because I kind of like that. But you need to make sure you're choosing the right configuration you want to run, which is I want to do debug on my local AMPS web application, Hello World. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And what you're going to notice is it's going to pop up browser right away, and nothing's really been set up right now, no breakpoints. And this is the file that the one actually on the server that you're going to want to utilize. I'm going to pause here for a moment, and so give me a break. I have to unfortunately answer. All right, so we're back, and what I'm going to show you is you don't actually put the breakpoints in this local file here that's part of your PHP projects on PHPStorm. So I'm going to kill the process that I've started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the debug button, okay? And it's going to pop up another, and look, 2 files. If you put your mouse over it, what you're going to notice is this file is actually on the local PHPStorm project, and this file, look at the path here, is actually the one that's on the local web server. It's that one that you want to put the breakpoints in. So I'm going to put some breakpoints here and there. You can notice it's actually paused here. Okay? So I'm going to run it. I'm running it. Okay? I can examine if I like some of the variables and things like this. Here's the variable A3, for example. And then I can, do whatever kind of inspections I want. Here you can see the values being printed out, and then continue on. And the results you'll actually see here in the browser window. So I'm going to kill that and do it again. Okay. So again, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to stop this. Okay. And you can, if you want to clean things up, you can come down here and you can close all the tabs. You can again hit the debug mode. It's stopped here. Notice my Chrome is flashing because here it is. It's starting the debug session. Nothing is visible, okay, at this point. And again, you can trace it through. You can see what the different variables are, right, here in the variable tab. Watch when I click on this. Now I have the variable A3. I can see what's going on here. I can look at cookies, information coming in. I can look at different requests. For example, if I look at this request, it has a debug session start variable, right? But maybe you're passing it in different ways. Anyways, it'll tell you information about the request, the server. This is on localhost and all of that kind of stuff, in addition to whatever local variables are happening. You can see if there's any globals, like our get array, if you were sending data via post, which we're not, because we're actually doing a get request, then it could track it, that kind of stuff. Moving on, you can just step through, I'm done, and now at the end is when you can actually see it finally receiving the final, because it runs the entire program before it sends back to the client. This is the client, the web browser, the web page that it was creating with those print statements. Okay? So that is the idea of how you actually debug. And so that's the end. The next step, besides running locally, is to deploy and run on the remote server. It's actually pretty similar to the local server. It's just that instead of the deployment configuration being local, you're going to specify a remote machine. So you're going to have your host name and your password and your login. I showed you this before. And then instead of deploying to the local, you're going to deploy to that account. And you can see it there. You can actually see all the files there remotely. And you can run it, again, like the option 1 by typing it in. Or you can actually run it with a configuration. Now, a word about debugging remotely. Mostly, that's not something necessarily that you're going to do. Our servers are not going to allow us to alter the PHP INI files, but you would have to set it up. So we don't have that capability, and this is why a lot of times we'll do development on your local machine, and your local machine is set up that way. But let's just show you what happens. I'm going to go ahead and clear down here, and I'm going to go ahead and show you, first of all, The configuration I set up, it's a PHP web application, but in this case it's for our server, our CS web server, CS Web 01. This we created before again. We've already seen this. And then this is the URL. You'll need to know the URL of where you want to put it. And this is what will come as a URL starting with the host name. And we're going to launch it on Chrome. Okay? So if I was to actually run this, so here I've chosen it, I hit run. Okay? And that's one of the things that it does right here is it'll bring it up here in the browser, the CS Web 01, and it'll actually run it directly from here. It'll actually transfer the file and run it at the same time. If you want to just deploy it, you can go to Tools, you can select whatever it is you want to deploy, and you can say Tools, Deployment, and upload to, and in this case, rather than the local, you want to upload it to the remote server, and it'll transfer the file. And again, I can switch here to my remote server, and I can go in here and I can actually see the files and look at them. Again, we can't do debugging, so you're going to do your debugging locally, and when everything's done, you'll go ahead and transfer it and then test it remotely is always a good idea. So that's the end of what I wanted to show you. So those are the options for running. Again, you're going to be primarily doing option 2. Of course, you'll be deploying it on the remote web server once you've made sure you don't have any errors.